Have you ever wondered, how do you check if the bladder in your pressure tank is no longer functional? Have you ever thought about what happens when that happens? Today we're going to talk about how do we check the pressure tank to make sure the bladder is doing what it's supposed to do. And then we're also going to talk about what happens when it's broken. And should you worry? Let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we are going to want to identify where we're putting the water. The reason this is important is because the only way to check if the bladder in your tank is bad, beyond the bladder being completely gone, is you're going to have to run water of some variety, right? When the pressure tank is functional, there's going to be air up top, water in the bottom, and a bladder in between the two, so they're separate. So what'll happen is, as the pump goes, it'll compress the air. Over time, that up and down is going to cause the bladder to rupture. If the air pressure goes away, the top portion of the tank will fill up. When we're looking, the very first thing you're going to want to do is listen. So we're going to go down to the pressure tank and you're going to watch. You're going to need to run water. So whether that's hooking a hose up to the spigot at the bottom of the pressure tank or running a utility sink, bathtub, whatever, you have to run water. But you have to be able to turn the water off when you're running. And the reason why is you have to get water running to where the pump kicks on. That's when the contact plates touch and the pump is engaged. It's going to be at the pressure switch. So you have to run water until the pump turns on. Once the pump turns on, you have to stop running the water. You take a stopwatch and you start timing it. You got to see how fast does it take for that pump to turn on and then turn off. So typically you're going to see a 30-50 switch, a 40-60 switch. So the pump should turn on at 30 psi, 40 psi, whatever, and it should turn off at 50 psi or 60 psi. When these systems are designed and installed, the math should be 60 seconds of runtime. So from the first click to the second click, you should see a 60-second gap between the two. If the person didn't do the math or they didn't design it correctly, you might get less than 60. You might also get more than 60-second runtime. So I don't really start getting super concerned until we're in the 30-second range. Most commonly, if your bladder is completely gone, you're going to see that bad boy cycle every 5 to 15 seconds. And what'll happen is it'll turn on, it'll run, and then it'll immediately click off. This is what we call a short cycle. Very, very common for a blown pressure tank bladder. The next thing, if you're a homeowner, you might notice pulsation in the water. The water may increase and decrease. Increase, decrease, and it's constantly doing that as the pump turns on and turns off. This one's a little bit harder for a homeowner to see unless you know what you're looking for or you're paying really, really close attention. Looking at the pressure switch for short cycling, way simpler, way more often, and way easier for the homeowner to catch. But let's just say that you're doing this. You want to be really, really sure that that bladder's blown. If you go to the top of the pressure tank, there's usually going to be a little cap covering a Schrader valve. Unscrew that cap, and you can take your finger or you can take a pen, and you just take something and you press it. Air should be the only thing that comes out of the top of that Schrader valve. So if you press it and water shoots out, the only way water is getting to the top of that pressure tank is if the bladder is ruptured or busted in some way, shape, or form. So if you press the top, water shoots out, and you're watching that it's short cycling, it's time to replace your tank. But let's talk about when it's not as cut and dry as that. Sometimes it can happen to where it's not short cycling and water is not shooting out of the top of it, but the tank is still waterlogged. So how do you check that? The first thing we're gonna want to do is listen. So earlier we were listening for the cut on, cut off, so the click sound, right? Now what we want to listen to is a gurgling sound. So if the bladder's gone, usually what will happen is you'll hear the water shooting through wherever the hole is, whether it's in the top or the side. You'll hear the water shoot out and up and hit the metal. So you'll hear like a rushing sound, a gurgling sound like this. When that happens, that means that the water is now getting out of where it ought to be. But you may not be getting short cycling because you have air pressure in the top of the tank that's basically counteracting all of that water. If you press the top of the Schrader valve, the same issue, you're still going to see air pressure. So we want to confirm our findings. We don't want to just guess that because we hear a sound that we have a problem with the pressure tank. So what do? Great question. We have to go to the spigot at the bottom of the tank, hook up our valve or hook up our hose to it, and then we can run it outside. So if we hook up to that port, we're able to open it up, drain the tank down. Obviously, you have to turn the power to the well pump off. Usually there's a switch or the electric panel somewhere in close proximity to this, but you have to turn the power off, drain the system down, right? Make sure there's no water in there. And then you go to the top of the tank, just rock it back and forth gently, right? Don't go crazy, because most of you guys are going to have CPVC piping, and that stuff, if you shake it too hard, you're going to break it. So you want to make sure you gently rock it back and forth, and you listen. So sometimes you might get some water at the bottom of the tank. No big deal. If you hear it at the bottom, you're still good. But if you hear it at the top of the tank where it's sloshing around, now we've got a problem with the water getting to where it ought not to be getting. So we rock it. If we hear water up top, the only way water is getting up top is if the bladder is broken. When a bladder is gone, the only step that you have is to replace the whole tank. There's no means, as far as I'm aware, of repairing a bladder, right? It's built in while it's manufactured. You just replace the tank. It's kind of like a leaking water heater. What are the problems with this, though? You might be wondering, well, who cares if it's short cycles? Who cares if the bladder's blown? I'm just going to keep doing my thing. You shouldn't. Right? And so the problem is, if you have a pressure tank that is not functioning correctly, the auxiliary function of it is to give runtime for the pump. So remember, we already talked that pumps, or the pressure switch, is supposed to run for 60 seconds. So if we're not running long enough, what we're doing is we're causing wear and tear on the pump. So the start, stop, you're going to cook your well pump. So a lot of times what I see happen is the pressure tank goes bad, nobody notices or nobody pays attention to it, and then it cooks the well pump, and so now you don't have water. And so when you don't have water, guess what? You're going to call somebody to come fix that problem. So they'll show up, they'll fix the well pump, and at least in our area, everybody will at least check the pressure tank. They'll look at the stuff inside the house to make sure there's no other issues that would have caused the well pump to burn up beyond age. So you get the well pump replaced, and that's usually where you find out that your pressure tank is no good. So now you end up spending $2 or $3 grand to replace the pump, and now you're going to spend $1,500 to $3 grand to replace the pressure tank. So now you're all in about $6 grand to $5 grand, somewhere in that ballpark, for something that if you had gotten the pressure tank replaced, it probably would have helped to extend the life of that well pump, and you might not have had to worry about it quite as frequently. What does this mean? This means that as a homeowner, whenever you're changing the filters in your furnace, if you're doing any laundry, just listen to your pressure tank every now and again. I usually tell people every 6 months or so, just take a look at the water. Like, just run the sink, walk down there, and just make sure everything looks like it's doing what it ought to be doing. Nothing weird's happening, nothing's dripping, nothing's leaking. Everything is functional and doing what it ought to do. I know it's easier said than done, and maybe I'm just a weird person where I do that at my own house, but I think it's a really good idea. If you are a homeowner, to go look at your utilities, just watch them every now and again. Just make sure that everything's doing good. You live in that house, so you know what things sound like when they're functioning normal. So you want to listen for when maybe they're not sounding normal. So that way you can address it and get ahead of it before it becomes a big problem. At least in the world of well and septic, most of the issues that pop up are pretty minimal. But sometimes you get some real expensive ones that'll pop up, and it's a good idea to try and get ahead of big problems when you can. Hopefully you found this useful. Let me know below, when's the last time you looked at your pressure tank? I have videos posted every day on the world of well and septic. If you found this useful, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave your comments, and I look forward to talking to you guys tomorrow.